Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to this forum featuring your candidates for the House of Delegates. I am Ann Cantor with the League of Women Voters of the Fairfax area, and I will be your moderator. We are pleased to have these co-sponsors: Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, the American Association of University Women of Virginia, the Fairfax County Council of PTAs, the NAACP, the Voice of Vietnamese Americans, and the Zeta Phi Beta Sorority. We are all nonpartisan and nonprofit entities. LWVFA would like to thank the sponsors, and the sponsors would like to thank the candidates for taking this opportunity to meet with you. We would like to particularly thank the producers of Inside Scoop at Fairfax Public Access. Inside Scoop airs every Monday night at 8 p.m. Here's the format. All candidates certified to appear on the November 7th ballot were invited to participate in this forum. I will introduce each candidate, who will deliver a 1.5-minute remark. Candidates are seated in the order in which they will appear on the ballot. After the first question, I will rotate the order in which candidates give their 1-minute answers. Candidates will then each give a 1-minute closing statements. The candidates have agreed to these rules. If you have questions, please send them to us before 8:30 using the contact information at the bottom of your screen. I hope. Let's begin for the opening statements. From the 38th District, the Democratic candidate is L.K. Kory. Ms. Kory, you have 1.5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and I am delighted to be here. I have to take some of my time to thank the League of Women Voters for organizing this forum. They are reliably promoting democracy and access in our area, and I thank you very much. My name is Kaye Kory. I am the delegate for the 38th District. That encompasses Annandale and Greater Falls Church. I was elected in 2009. I've served 8 years in the House of Delegates. Prior to that, I was elected to the Fairfax County School Board as the Mason District representative, and I served on the school board for 10 years. As a delegate, I sit on 3 legislative committees: Finance, which deals with revenue and taxes; Commerce and Labor, which deals with economic development, labor rules, and I have to hurry up, and public safety, and that is police and National Guard and sheriffs. Thank you.
Okay, our next candidate, also from the 38th District, is the Republican candidate, Paul B. Haring. Mr. Haring?
I too would like to thank the League of Women Voters for all the good work they're doing for sponsoring this event. I live in Annandale, Virginia. I'm married and father of 6 children. I have much experience, including actually being a delegate for 3 terms in the state of Texas. And I'm a graduate of the University of Texas Law School, the University of St. Thomas in Houston. I went to law school not to practice law, but to be a better legislator. And I think that is a very good background for this job. I'm also running because I'm very committed to defending and respecting human life. And we need to change to do that. So there's a night and day difference between myself and Mrs. Kory. I believe in the culture of life and respecting life. I believe in protecting marriage. She delights in the Supreme Court, actually Fourth Court of Appeals decision overruling Virginia's marriage laws. And I think we need to stand up and protect life.
Thank you. Our next candidate is from the 39th District, and the Democratic candidate, Vivian Watts. Ms. Watts?
Thank you very much. In trying to think about how to introduce myself, I decided that in my office, I don't have any plaques saying thanks for trying to help us. I have just one plaque that I've chosen, and that is the one that says, after 15 years of community effort while raising the family, I was named Fairfax County Citizen of the Year. And it's that citizen roots that I have carried with me throughout my service in the legislature and as Secretary of Transportation and Public Safety, both prisons and pavement at the same time. With that background, though, my value today only depends upon how much I stay in touch, how much I work to stay current on the issues, and again, how much I continue to enjoy the job representing the Springfield-Annandale area in Richmond. It continues to be a situation where Northern Virginia is particularly challenged, and I am determined, as I have been practically my entire adult life, to make sure that we have the kind of voice, the kind of representation of the real life of people here in Northern Virginia and what our aspirations are, as well as frustrations in traffic. Thank you very much.
Our next candidate is from the 43rd District, and he is Democratic candidate Mark D. Sickles. Mr. Sickles?
Thank you. Again, I apologize for my voice tonight. I've got a bit of a cold. I am now serving in my 14th year representing a part of South Fairfax County, the communities of Franconia, Huntington, Kingstown, Newington, and Lorton. I'm the senior Democrat, having been around so long now, and most of the committees I serve on, including the Privileged and Elections Committee, where all campaign finance and election law is written, also constitutional amendments, and I often see League representatives there. In fact, I work with the League almost on a weekly basis on bills that are before our committee. I'm also the senior Democrat on Health, Welfare, and Institutions, which is the Health Authorizing Committee, and we have a broad scope of jurisdiction, including health professions and public sewers and septic systems and pharmacy issues and funeral directors and social policy and Medicaid policy. So that has kept us real busy. 3 years ago, I was appointed to the Appropriations Committee, and I serve on the Higher Ed, the Health and Human Resources Subcommittee, and the Transportation Subcommittee. It is a very busy committee assignments I have down there during the first half of the session. People can hardly find me in my office. But I wanted to bring up two topics. I had enough time, but I only have 15 seconds left in this opening thing. I'll talk about it later, nonpartisan redistricting efforts and what we did on that this year and what we hope to do before 2021. And also in healthcare to fix the exchanges in healthcare.gov so that 68 jurisdictions in Virginia do not go bare.
Thank you very much. Our next candidate is from the 45th District. It is Democratic candidate Mark Levine.
Hello, my name is Mark Levine. I represent the 45th. That is the eastern half of Alexandria, some portions of South Arlington, and two very proud precincts in Fairfax, Bellevue, and the Huntington area. I'm very familiar with the Inside Scoop. Indeed, this broadcast is one that I began in 2004. It's been going on 13 years strong, and y'all do a very good job. Congratulations to all of you, and thank you to League of Women Voters for being here. Some people wonder what it's like to be a journalist going into politics, and I often wonder why more journalists don't get into politics. You know, part of the role of a journalist is to ask tough questions, and I like to think that I'm the guy that is always asking tough questions. You know, we get so many bills that come our way, thousands of them that we have to make decisions on, and I try my best to read each and every one of them I can and to ask tough questions about them. I am a proud progressive Democrat on everything from protecting all aspects of life, including health care, which I think is very important. We have to expand Medicaid. I support universal health care eventually, but also in things like paid family medical leave, because I think that when someone is having a child or taking care of an aging parent, the last thing they want to think about is their job. Also, as a journalist, I'm a co-founder actually of the Virginia Transparency Caucus. I'm very proud of the fact that we are finally getting cameras in committee rooms. And that's something I did on a bipartisan basis with a Tea Party senator, Senator Amanda Chase. Look forward to chatting with you today.
Thank you very much. And now from the 49th District, we have two candidates. The Democratic candidate is Alfonso Lopez. Mr. Lopez?
Thank you for the opportunity to be with you this evening. I believe in a Commonwealth that lifts everyone up and leaves no one behind. And as your delegate, I've been a champion for our values in Richmond. I'm proud of my bipartisan work and the relationships I've developed on both sides of the aisle to find common ground and get things done. Over the last 6 years, I've been the patron, chief co-patron, or co-patron of 57 bills signed into law. I'm proud to have passed legislation addressing everything from helping small businesses to easing congestion at polling places, from renewable energy to protecting immigrants from fraud. I'm especially proud of my legislation creating the Virginia Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which has already invested $1.5 million in our community. Going forward, we must focus on jobs in the economy, education, and the needs of working families. I pledge to continue fighting for better schools, transportation solutions, environmental safeguards, new jobs and economic development, and the Virginia values of embracing diversity, tolerance, and compassion that we all hold dear. Politics is about improving people's lives, as I hope I've shown you over the last 6 years, and in my time as the minority whip of the Virginia House Democratic Caucus. I will always work hard to make sure Virginia is a place where we lift everyone up and leave no one behind. I look forward to the conversation this evening.
Thank you. And also from the 49th District, the Republican candidate is Adam Roosevelt. Mr. Roosevelt?
Good evening, military members and families, law enforcement, first responders, civic leaders, friends and family. Thank you. I would like to start by saying thank you to the League of Women Voters and the sponsors who sponsored this debate tonight. I would also like to say thank you to my opponent, Alfonso Lopez, for accepting this forum tonight. I want to start with saying that this community needs to think about what we're going to do moving forward for the next generation. If you elect me to the House of Delegates, I will champion legislation that will reduce taxes. If you elect me to the House of Delegates, I will ensure that our education system is strong and that our children can obtain higher paying jobs. The 49th District right now has a high cost of living. We need to ensure that our children can stay in this district. If you elect me to the House of Delegates, I will make sure that our transportation infrastructure is reliable, and I will ensure that it is affordable. I will also make sure that our small businesses have a way forward. We need to ensure that the taxes are reduced for our small businesses, and we need to make sure that our small businesses can obtain contracts with the state and federal government. And lastly, I say this as a military veteran, as a person who has served this community, as a person who has been to war. I will protect the veteran families and ensure that they have a future and the spouses have a future as well. I look forward to your questions tonight, and thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you. Now we go on to asking the questions. Questions have been sent in by the viewers and other people in the organizations that are sponsoring this candidate. I'm going to start with Mr. Haring and go around. Everybody's going to have a 1-minute response. Okay, the first question is, what gun sales legislation would you support, and what additional gun sales legislation would you object to?
At this time, I don't know whether I would change any of the laws. I had questionnaires from the NRA and the Gun Owners Association, and the NRA told me they couldn't give me a rating because I didn't answer all their questions. And the reason why I want to carefully think about every one and do what's best for the rights of people. They have a right to own guns, and I'm for that right, and I will protect it. On the other hand, I want to consider any proposals that has merit to see if any changes might be necessary without infringing on the constitutional rights of people to bear arms.
Thank you. Ms. Watts, you have a minute.
Thank you. A number of years ago, I introduced the legislation to try to have meaningful background checks outside of the gun shows so that we don't have this major loophole. I was supported in that effort by gun dealers who know the seriousness of doing background checks so that not only are we looking at criminal history, but we're also looking at issues that may deal with domestic violence or mental health. We have not made the progress that we need to make. I remain very concerned about the loosening of our concealed carry permits so that we go to the lowest common denominator of other states. What I would love to see is to bring back the one gun a month sales that unfortunately in the last administration was taken from our books, and unlike the current administration, there was no governor to veto it, and we now have lost that important block of the sales of guns up and down the East Coast.
Thank you. Mr. Sickles?
Thank you. I agree with most of everything that Vivian said. I think magazine size is something we need to look at. When Gabby Gifford was shot in Arizona, the only reason her shooter was being able to take down is he was changing his 10 magazine round clip, and someone was able to take him down. It's unconscionable to me that people can walk around with 30 and 40 rounds in one magazine. I voted against doing away with one handgun a month. I'm against the movement to do away with having any permit at all for carrying concealed.
Thank you. Mr. Levine?
So I agree with everything that Delegate Watts and Delegate Sickles just said on guns. I also have been focused on background checks. I put forward 2 pieces of legislation that died in subcommittee. One said that if you're going to sell a gun online to a stranger, you should be able to check and see if that person has a background, if they has a string of felonies. You should also be able to see if they're on the terrorist watch list. Because surprisingly, the Republicans who voted down my bill believe that an Al-Qaeda member should be able to, they could be killed in Yemen, but they can walk into a Virginia gun store and buy a whole slew of AK-47s, and they think that's just fine. I do not. I've also stood up on the floor to protect victims of domestic violence from all the guns they want in those homes. And this season, in 2018, should I be reelected, I'm going to introduce a bill to deal with Charlottesville, a bill to say that if you're at a protest and the police are already all around you, you should be able to prevent weapons from being there.
Thank you. Mr. Lopez?
Thank you. I agree with my colleagues, and I'm proud to have stood shoulder to shoulder with them fighting on these issues before militia and police and on the floor. The fact is we need universal background checks. We also have got to deal with how easy it is to get a concealed carry permit in Virginia. Right now, you don't actually have to touch a gun. You can just do it online by taking a multiple choice test over and over and over again. I put in legislation each year on these issues, and what's interesting is one bill that I thought would easily go through is about we should be some kind of penalty if you give a firearm to a 4-year-old. 4-year-old is just learning how to name colors, parts of a story, the alphabet, how to tell time. They don't have the responsibility or the sense of responsibility to use a firearm. How many more children need to be harmed because we won't pass sensible gun violence prevention legislation in the Commonwealth?
Thank you. Mr. Roosevelt?
As a member of the military community, I support the right to bear arms. I went to Afghanistan. It is my trade. I do that to protect the citizens here in the United States of America and the Commonwealth of Virginia. I will say this right now. We have to be very responsible with legislation that goes forward, primarily because there are members in our community, MS-13 and gang members, who will use this loophole, if you will, to cause harm on our community. So I believe that the background checks, primarily for unlicensed dealers, needs to make sure that they are doing their due diligence, because the MS-13 gang members and the other transnational criminal organizations that will exploit those laws, we cannot allow that to happen. We must protect the community. But again, I support the Second Amendment. I stand by the right to bear arms. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kory?
Thank you. I, too, support the statements and beliefs that my Democratic colleagues have made. I'd like to highlight a couple of items on this entire issue, and it is important that we bring back one gun a month. In New York City, the police tell us that the majority of the illegal guns that they recover have come from Virginia. And that is not something we want to be known for. I have tried to pass legislation restricting gun use and gun carrying on school grounds. To me, that seems like a very simple point to agree with. However, I'm constantly opposed by the different gun organizations. And I would ask your support in the next session to push no guns on school grounds, no guns anywhere on school grounds. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this next question, we start with Vivian Watts. Ms. Watts, several bills recommending methods for redistricting reform were proposed in 2016, but they were tabled in committee. How can you get legislation out of committee so that the whole House can vote on bills? I asked an experienced delegate from this.
I was going to say, not only were they killed in committee last year, the year before, all the way back to 2002, they have been repeatedly killed in committee usually in subcommittee, without even the full public debate of the full committee, not much less the floor. We will keep trying. From my point of view, it is incredibly important that we deal with gerrymandering so that we can bring balance back to the House of Delegates, where we currently are outnumbered. We have a balance of 2-1 Republicans to Democrats. Therefore, committees are split 15-7. If we could only go closer to 13-9, I'd like that. I'd obviously like to have it flipped. But we've got to have more robust, open debate and not one-party control.
Thank you. Mr. Sickles?
Thank you. Virginia 2021 is a relatively new group that has had a big impact on this issue. The business community in Virginia has always supported nonpartisan redistricting, or districting that's not done by people who have a self-interest in the outcome like we do. I strongly support it. I've voted for the last 14 years for every bill that came up in either subcommittee or full committee that moved us in the right direction. But this year we had a packed house. It was different. It's all on film. You can go to Virginia 2021's website and watch the hearing where they cut us off. I think that we're on the right direction here. When you vote for governor, think about the person who's going to handle this in the most bipartisan manner. If we can't get a constitutional amendment to the ballot on 2020, which we still can do.
Thank you. Mr. Levine?
So I'm a firm believer that the voters should choose legislators rather than having the legislators choose themselves. I completely support nonpartisan redistricting. And it's interesting because if the Democratic nominee, if Ralph Northam doesn't win this election, the Republicans will control all branches of government if we don't take back the House of Delegates. And that means that they will gerrymander the state like it's never been gerrymandered before. It will be gerrymandered like North Carolina or Mississippi. And they can actually make it, again, it doesn't matter that Virginia is a purple state. They can make it so that 2/3 of the legislators are of a single party, not based on the votes, but based on changing the lines. We need to change that. I'm hopeful the courts change it if we don't, and I'm glad that they filmed it. I like to think that my Transparency Caucus played a role in that. We are going to film all committees next year, and I'd like to film subcommittees too, because if people are going to deny this right, they need to be on the record.
Mr. Lopez?
I stand with my Democratic colleagues on this issue, and we've fought and spoken on this numerous times. You know, the fact is that technology has overtaken gerrymandering. You can now gerrymander with a laser-like scalpel using data analytics and other data. The fact is that despite the fact that Democrats have won 56, 52, 51% of every statewide election for the last several years, it's 66-34 in the House of Delegates. Why is that? Gerrymandering with a laser-like scalpel. It disenfranchises folks, and it's not right, and it's not who we should be.
Thank you. Mr. Roosevelt?
That's a very good question. My opponent, Mr. Lopez, does not benefit from any changes that are currently right now because primarily he's never been challenged by a Republican. So I will tell you right now that he will not be the first person to go and raise his voice at the House of Delegates, primarily because it would change the way they see him winning in the 49th district. I have been a bipartisan person by birth. That's why I serve in the military. Again, I believe that we should work across the party lines to make sure that there's voices in our community. But let us make this clear now. In FY17, Mr. Lopez did not try to patron any legislation to move this particular topic forward. So again, let us make action. Let us not talk. Let us put it where the pen is at, and we get 2 years to raise our piece. Let us protect the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kory?
Thank you. I agree with the points that have been made about gerrymandering. And Virginia really is gerrymandered in embarrassing ways. We disenfranchise so many voters. One voice, one vote is not true in Virginia. We have to change that. And we can change it here in our Commonwealth and not rely on the federal government. If we have legislation next year that creates a constitutional amendment or at least puts in law the requirements for fair redistricting. I have supported and voted for every single bill that has come my way with this intent in mind. And I, again, agree with my colleagues.
Thank you. Mr. Haring?
When I was in the Texas legislature, I sponsored a bill for redistricting the congressional districts, and I chose to make them very compact without regard to what party it was. And future President George H.W. Bush filed a lawsuit as a Republican to challenge that law, and his attorney asked me to intervene on his behalf, and I did. Even though I was a Democrat, I intervened on behalf of the Republicans to have a fair district. And I don't think we should delegate the duty to redistrict to an unelected body. And who would choose the delegates anyway? You still be the Republican members of the House and Senate, I would assume. So I don't think you're really going to solve the problem. The problem is to elect good people who will do what's right. And it would be very helpful. The word compassion was mentioned today. And I think we should, I see the sign, I have to stop, so I'll have to stop.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hare. Okay, first question starts with Delegate Sickles. Okay, this starts with you. What means of providing dedicated source of funding, dedicated source of income for Metro will you support?
Well, first, before we raise more money, we need to make sure that the Metro is safe, reliable, is running efficiently, that management is in control of better than it has been, that we're doing proper maintenance on it. I think I would be open to various suggestions because we have to have Metro in a better condition. We have now 100,000 people fewer per day ride the Metro, and that's just a shame. We need people out of their cars and on the train. So I would be open to various suggestions. I think it's going to be a matter of what is able to be passed. But I don't think we should do it until we get reforms in the system.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Levine?
Well, I agree with Delegate Sickles that there are problems in Metro. We can't deny it. And that's why we have the new safety safe track that we've had, and we've had a new commissioner who's being very tough on people. But Metro is crucial to Northern Virginia. I mean, it is how people get to work. Lots of people don't have cars in my district, and they rely on the Metro. So we do need a dedicated source of funding for Metro. And there are many different ways to do it that have been suggested. One of the things I'd like to do, frankly, is raise the gas tax. I've put in a bill to put a floor under the gas tax. It's complicated. It's based on a percentage. But basically, the state gas tax has a floor. We need one in Northern Virginia. You know, if people are going to drive and use the roads and clog and make traffic, then they should help provide the way for people who don't have cars to get in. So that's one way I'd like to do it. But I'd be open to other ways, too. We definitely need a dedicated source of funding. We're the only major metro system in the country that doesn't have one.
Thank you. Mr. Lopez?
Right. Just to echo what was said, we need safe, reliable, and flourishing Metro. And the fact is that we are the only Metro system in the nation that does not have a dedicated source of revenue. Here's the kicker. Metro provides around $600 million in revenue for Virginia every year. That's 10% of what we put into state school aid. The fact is that there's a fiscal cliff coming in FY 2019. And we're going to have a shortfall for Metro. We need to have some kind of dedicated revenue source that we can get through the General Assembly and or localities to fully fund Metro, because it's about quality of life. It's about not just getting people from point A to point B, but it's about attracting jobs and businesses to the Commonwealth. And the fact is that if we don't have a solid metro system, that will affect our quality of life, that will affect traffic, and that will affect our ability to attract businesses and keep Virginia humming.
Thank you. Mr. Roosevelt?
That's a great question, and I'll just start with waste, fraud, and abuse. We already saw what happened with the particular investment there, $1.2 million of trying to procure some type of thing. And we need to make sure that we look at and audit where the money is going to be spent. And this is the problem right now. We need an audit. There's not a need to raise more taxes here. We pay enough taxes. And we've seen the same problems with the personal property vehicle tax, which Virginia is 1 out of 7 states, which allows the county to tax its citizens more and more. Under Democratic leadership, under Mr. Alfonso Lopez and colleagues, there will be continued raises of taxes in the district, and there won't be a district for young people to live in, let alone seniors. How we're going to raise money, it's not going to happen through taxes. We need to make sure we audit where we're spending and be responsible with our investments. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kory?
Thank you. As some of my colleagues have said, right now, Metro is truly in dire straits. It's not reliable. It's not considered safe by a lot of the riders, and it needs money badly. That's very difficult to overcome. We have to have faith that it will become safe. We've got most of the mechanisms in place. Metro is an economic driver. It's also key to the health of the air and our environment in our region. We do need to have a dedicated funding source, whether it's gas tax, whether it's a tax, an additional sales tax. We have to agree on it and not waste time with all the intra-metro fighting.
Thank you. Mr. Haring?
I think it's very important that we improve the metro train and also the buses. One reason why there's so many less riders is because the fees are too high. We need to get those fees down for it's more affordable. And whatever we have to do that, well, I'm for it. So it's essential that we do it. We cannot continue to every year, every day increase the number of cars on the road without having people to spend many hours, some people, to get to work. We need to make it easy for people to get to work, have more time with their families, and the way to do it is encourage more people to use the buses and the trains. So I'm all for supporting it, as much as we need to do it.
Thank you. Ms. Watts?
We not only are the only system that does not have a dedicated source of revenue among the systems in the United States, but we're also the only system that is comprised of 3 distinct jurisdictions: Maryland, Virginia, and D.C. And the problem then in moving forward to a regional source of dedicated revenue is right in the middle of that problem. To do so, we are going to have to deal with the apportionment of the revenue raised. If it's a sales tax, then Virginia will be contributing significantly more than we currently are as far as cost of service. All of those details are going to have to be worked out as we go after the very difficult battle of funding a metro. But when I did the Safe Ride track tour, those pieces of wood that hold the rails apart are 40 years old. We have got to have jurisdictional agreement on management.
Thank you very much. Okay, this next question. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Sickles.
I think I started this
You
one.
started, okay.
I got
All right.
more.
Now, I bet every one of you does. Okay, this question is from Mr. Levine. Can the Virginia legislature enact laws that will prevent more incidents like Charlottesville? What would they be?
Well, I think so. I've been thinking a lot about Charlottesville, and I know my constituents are very upset by what happened there. One of the first things I thought about was, and I mentioned this already, was the proliferation of weapons at protests. You know, I hear from people who support gun rights, and they say, well, you know, a police officer isn't always around, so we need to have a gun. You know, if you're at a permitted protest, the police are right there. And in fact, the guns actually, I think, prevented the police from acting in many ways. They didn't want to be out-armed. So Alabama has a law that prevents arms at protests. I think we could do it. I've gone to D.C., by the way, and they don't even let you have a wooden sign. So, you have to have cardboard. I also think we have to take another look at the Confederate memorials and let localities decide what they want to do, and I'll be introducing legislation to do that as well.
Mr. Lopez.
I've heard a lot of talk recently about what happened in Charlottesville and somehow blaming the state or blaming localities. The fact is that the KKK, white nationalists, and neo-Nazis came into Charlottesville looking for trouble. You don't come in for a peaceful protest with dozens of men carrying AR-15s. That's why I support legislation addressing open carry laws, which have gone too far. I also put in legislation last year addressing religious bigotry and racism in Virginia as a resolution. But I would love to get into the weeds on Confederate monuments specifically. I used to work with the National Trust for Historic Preservation. The fact is, remembering our history is easy. We have history books. The fact is, though, that honoring rebels who were working to defend slavery and honoring them in public sphere is not what we should be doing. Naming our highways and statues and memorials, those people are being put there in a public place to defend or to be honored. They should not be honored for what they did.
Thank you very much. Mr. Roosevelt.
As a minority member, I have been subjected to racism growing up. I was unfortunate to be exposed to that as a child, and I wasn't even able to go into the stores in Norfolk, Virginia. So I will tell you, as a minority speaking, this is a real situation, and we need to talk about it. But I will start here. The Code of Virginia 15.2.1812 preserves war memorials. It's not just the Confederate war. It's other things that are going on here that we need to make sure that we don't set the precedent to remove other war memorials. Those memorials were erected as an overall history for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And if we start making the case to remove history in Virginia, the next war will be next. Operation Enduring Freedom, Freedom Sentinel, Iraq. All those wars will become a launching pad to be taken down, and that is history. And I'd like to take my children there to say this is where America was. This is where America is today. Let us support history and let us preserve it, but let us learn and not repeat ourselves. Thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Kory?
What happened in Charlottesville is truly a travesty, and every single person should remember that as a lesson that we have to move forward to control concealed carry, especially in public places, especially in protests. About the statues, the Confederate war memorials, yes, I think it should be up to the localities. It's a complex issue that raises a lot of emotions, and I think it's best dealt with close to home. We also need to review our history curriculum. It is not where I'd like it to be, and I think we need to have a more balanced history curriculum and not focus on the heroes of the Confederacy.
Mr. Haring?
Charlottesville was a very horrible event and shocking to all of us. I think we need to go more basic. We need to recognize that life is a gift from God, and they were all made in the image and likeness of God, and every person deserves respect and defense of his rights. Violence in any form, at protests or during the process of being born, should be stopped. It's makes no sense at all to say that you're for all these rights, but the most fundamental right is the right to be born. It comes from God. It doesn't come from the state. The state's duty is to defend it. And we need to make that clear that all rights are wonderful, are important, and we must defend every right of every person.
Thank you. Ms. Watts?
The Southern Poverty Law Center recently put out a graph of when the Civil War monuments were put up. I wish I had it here to share with you. As you look at just after the Civil War, there were very few that were constructed. And it wasn't until after Reconstruction when suddenly there is a huge increase in the number of monuments put up during Jim Crow. They were put up not to honor, but for one reason, to intimidate. And if you went into the courthouse and there is Robert E. Lee staring down at you, the message was loud and clear. There wasn't going to be equal justice under the law. So I also totally agree that this is a local decision, but that local decision depends upon the full understanding of the history of each name, each monument, each aspect of history that is being dealt with in that locality, so that the so that the population can better understand what our challenge is.
Mr. Sickles?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I agree with my Democratic colleagues on this. We need local control of these monuments. The statute the gentleman mentioned earlier has basically been struck down by a circuit court right now, so it's not applicable, which is a good thing, which has left the control mostly in local control. It's a complicated issue. There's some statutes that have their separate state authorizations, but anyway, as Vivian said, we should not be keeping monuments up that were erected during massive resistance in our state in the civil rights era. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And this next, Mr.
Lopez.
Mr. Lopez. Okay. All right. I'm a little confused here. Okay. What do you think about Medicaid expansion in Virginia? How is that going to work?
The 49th House of Delegates District is the second most populated district in terms of folks who would benefit from Medicaid expansion. 6,100 people, a lot of women and children. The fact is that we're leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars on the table. This would create around 30,000 jobs. We would be able to cover 410,000 people. The fact is, though, that this is not just a moral and a healthcare issue. It's an issue of economic development. Lee County lost its hospital. The fact is that what CEO is going to come into Lee County with their manufacturing plant or their call center, knowing full well that if a worker gets a stroke or has a heart attack, the closest hospital is probably in West Virginia, 75 miles away, a state that actually expanded Medicaid. This seems to be a no-brainer to me. And the fact is, the hospitals a couple years ago said that they would actually pay for all of the shortfall the state would have to cover.
Thank you.
This makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. Mr. Roosevelt.
Members of the 49th District, I'm here to represent your voice. Again, in the previous debate and the debate today, Mr. Lopez continues to reference West Virginia, a whole other state. He continues to talk about Lee County. We're in the 49th District, folks. Let us bring somebody who's really going to talk about the issues in our district. We cannot continue to have him go to Richmond and talk about legislation that will pass in another district, primarily to support that. I do not support the expansion of Medicaid primarily because I know we do not have the money. I'm a small business owner. A lot of you have to pay bills. They will raise taxes. That's what they do not tell you. They will raise taxes. And that is the problem right now. And again, under your leadership, Mr. Lopez, and the leadership of your colleagues, we will continue to raise taxes, and there will not be a district that we can live in. So again, we need to work with the General Assembly and work with the governor to ensure that middle-class families have a future in health care. I grew up there. I'm here to represent, and I'm here to make sure that they have a future, but let us not bankrupt the next generation in making those decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kory?
Sir, Mr. Roosevelt, I beg to differ with you. Actually, we can afford it. We can afford Medicaid expansion. It would save us money. Right now, we spend money on free clinics. We spend money on too many emergency room visits by people who are uninsured. That comes out of the state budget. If we had Medicaid expansion, we would have federal dollars to supplement the state budget. We would not have to raise taxes. Healthcare is a right, and it has a big effect on economic development.
Thank you. Mr. Haring?
The fact that we have all this free money, that's temporary. It doesn't last long under the law. I believe everyone should get good health care. They should be taken care of. No one should have to go sick. No one should die because they can't get a doctor or a hospital. And I will support legislation to take care of the poor. And whether it's, I don't know whether it be extension of Medicaid, we'll have to see what Congress does. But I am for helping the poor, not only with health, but in all other ways, and supporting welfare for people who need it. We want to eliminate destitution and do all we can to help the poor live better.
Thank you. Ms. Watts?
Specifically, we've been losing $6.6 million every day because we have not expanded Medicaid. 400,000 people in Virginia are without basic health care. In 70% of those households, one of the adults work. Meanwhile, when you try to fill the gap with just state money, you are raising taxes. And by the way, the $6.6 million has been collected from Virginia taxpayers by the federal government and is going to other states. When you try to do it by state money alone, you not only are doing just a fraction of what you could do otherwise, but issues like opioid abuse, mental health needs, as well as providing services for incarcerated populations are being borne by the taxpayers of Virginia at a much higher price tag than if we had expanded.
Thank you. Mr. Sickles?
Yes, we need a system to pay for every person in our state. We don't have that now. We have been looking for an alternative from the other side to explain how they're going to, say, cover a cancer incident for a family that has a $50,000 annual income. You know, healthcare costs are going up for lots of reasons, but one of them is we have these extraordinary medical breakthroughs, and we need to have one system for everybody with access to it. Yeah, we had a bipartisan proposal that unfortunately failed that would have taken 100% of the money back that our taxpayers are paying now, and the 10% that we would have had to pay eventually would have been covered by that plan. So we need to start being practical and stop being ideological on our healthcare system. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Levine?
You know, people think that progressive Democrats just want Medicaid expansion because they don't want innocent people to die when they don't otherwise need to die. And that's true. It is true that we have compassion. But it is also absolutely the fiscally conservative thing to do. The Trumpists have not gotten rid of Obamacare as much as they try. That is the law of the land. And in very red states like, yes, West Virginia and Kentucky, they are making it work. And you know how they do it? They don't spend a penny. We in Virginia don't have to spend a penny. If you don't want your taxes to go up, you should support Medicaid expansion. Take the $6 million a day that we've already paid as Virginians and use it. Delegate Lopez's opponent would throw it all away. He would take billions of dollars sitting there that we've already paid for and throw it to other states, I guess. What about helping Virginians? If you are a fiscal conservative, it is ridiculous not to support Medicaid expansion, particularly when the hospitals have agreed to cover every last penny that the federal government doesn't pay.
Thank you. Okay, I have a minute and 43 seconds. I'm going to ask for a one-word answer. Would you support decriminalizing marijuana?
Yes.
Ms. Kory?
Yes.
Absolutely no.
I serve on criminal law subcommittee. I can't answer it at this point. It depends upon the bill before me.
Generally speaking, I support it. I would like to read the bill.
Okay, Mr. Levine?
Yes, I support it. I've done a bill to do that.
Also, I need to see the legislation, but generally, yes.
Okay, great. All righty. We're going to move on now to the closing statements. Everybody has a minute to do a closing statement. You can say whatever you want to say. Okay, this is your stuff, and we're going to start once again with Ms. Kory. Okay.
Again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for setting this forum up and giving us this opportunity to get our voices out to you, the voters. Voting is a real gift. There's a lot of ideological pressure to restrict voting. We need to take it seriously that voting in November is a key to the prosperity and health of Virginia. Please vote. We need a Democratic governor to get rid of gerrymandering and to see through Medicaid expansion. Please vote in November.
Thank you. Mr. Haring.
Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy has indicated that he's going to retire next year. It'll be his last year. If this happens and President Trump names a good judge for the Supreme Court, Roe v. Wade will be abolished. It'll be sent to the same place that the Dred Scott decision. That's where it belongs. We must respect and defend human life. And Vivian Watts and Kaye, Kory and the other Democrats, they don't respect human life. They want to have taxpayers funding to kill babies. It's a human life. It's a scientific fact. And we need to stand up and take care of all people, respect the rights of every citizen, regardless of who they are. Each one is a great wonder. Each person is a great wonder, and we should respect and love everyone.
Thank you.
My first direct response is I deeply respect the life of every parent who is making the tough decision about whether or not they can care for their family. It is something that needs to be worked out through a doctor, through the woman carrying the child, as well as her loved ones. And that respect for her decisions, her moral, deep, personal decisions, is something I stand by. I look forward to the upcoming session. Again, as others, I am the ranking minority members on Courts Committee as well as on Finance and Science and Tech. I particularly want to continue the deep work that I've done in mental health, as well as looking at diversion of people with mental health problems from our criminal justice system, as our jails, unfortunately, have been replacing mental health services with incarceration.
Mr. Sickles.
Thank you. A lot of states would trade places with us. We have a lot going for us in our state. We have a good higher education system that's been not funded as well as it should be since the recession, the big recession. We need to work on making sure our transportation funding, since we passed a major bill in 2013, is funded efficiently, that we're using that money the best we can. We've got 11,000 to 12,000 individuals that need help from us because they have serious intellectual disabilities. We need to make sure that we are funding our hospitals that are paying for a large share of uninsured people. We are the 47th in the nation in per capita Medicaid spending. So we have our challenges, and we need to get education money back to Northern Virginia. Those of us in our delegation work hard to get the cost of competing passed and to make sure we get money sent back to our region outside the funding formula that discriminates against us. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Levine.
So, yeah, I guess I raised my voice a little on Medicaid expansion. I've been accused of caring a little too much. I guess what troubles me most, and listen, like I said, I've been a journalist for 13 years on the Inside Scoop. What troubles me the most about today's politics is this magical thinking that we hear so often from Republicans. This idea that, waste, fraud, and abuse will fix it all, and the money will come from somewhere, and we'll never raise your taxes, and everyone will get a pony, and there will always be rainbows. And what I hear from my Democratic colleagues, every single one of them here, Delegate Kory, Delegate Watts, Delegate Sickles, and Delegate Lopez, is people who understand there are tough answers. And we have hard choices, and we have to weigh concerns, and we have to recognize where the money is and how we can fund things. There aren't all magical solutions. I know magical solutions help give us the president we have today, but that doesn't mean that it's given us any answers, just a lot of questions.
Okay, Mr. Lopez.
Thank you. There is nothing in the world as rewarding as helping people. Meeting a family that has a roof over their head because of my Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Making it easier for veteran, women, and minority-owned small businesses to grow and thrive. Helping just one dreamer student get in-state tuition and a college degree. And ensuring that the social safety net is there for future generations. Going forward, we need to create more prosperity and do it in a way where everybody wins. We need to invest in our infrastructure and in our workforce, and most of all, in our children. To do that, we need experience and a deep, nuanced understanding of public policy and the legislative process in Richmond. The issues that we will be dealing with over the next 2 years are critical if we're going to keep Virginia moving forward. I will continue to be a champion for our values and priorities. I will continue fighting for the community I love, and I will continue fighting for a Virginia that lifts everyone up and leaves no one behind. I ask for your support and vote on Election Day.
Thank you. Mr. Roosevelt.
Yes, I would like to first make the statement here for all the constituents in the 49th District and across Virginia. Did Mr. Lopez care when House Bill 1868, he tried to patron to exploit child labor? 12-year-olds, right here in the general exemption. It's right here in the bill. 12-year-old on the tobacco farms. I will use my last seconds to say that I will represent this community. I will make sure we protect our children. I will make sure that transportation moves forward. I will make sure our veterans are protected. No House bill was even attempted to be patroned in FY17, Mr. Lopez. So I will be the representative of this community to make sure that all actions and legislation that moves forward in this district affects the 49th District. I will protect you. I will be your voice. But let's add truth to the discussion. Let us open the legislation. But I direct your attention to House Bill 1868, where there was a general exemption for 12-year-olds that worked for the House of Delegates under your leadership, Mr. Lopez.
Okay. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, so I'm going to do another lightning round with one more question. And I'm going to start, I'll start with Ms. Watts. Would you support a ban on uranium mining in Virginia?
I will, and I have.
Mr. Sickles.
I support the existing ban.
I also support the existing ban.
From an environmental perspective and from a safe drinking water perspective, I support the ban.
I support looking at technology that will allow us to see if there's going to be any damage to our environment. That's as far as I'll go for tonight on that particular question.
Okay. Ms. Kory?
I have supported the uranium ban since I've been in the legislature, and I will continue to do so.
Thank you.
I would not support it. I'd look unless it was necessary to protect the environment. If it's necessary to support the environment, yes. But I think we could work out something to do both, to have mine for uranium and also protect the environment. But if that's not possible, then the answer would be no.
Okay. Thank you all for all the candidates. Many thanks to all of you and all your answers. I'm sure they have to be very brief, and there have been many more questions that have been submitted than I have been able to ask. However, the League of Women Voters will submit all the questions to the candidates, and their responses will be posted on the League of Women Voters of the Fairfax area's website so that you can find them there. Okay, Election Day is the November 7th. Polls will open at 6 a.m. and close at 7 p.m. It's a long day. If you want to volunteer and help your community, please sign up to be an election poll worker. It's always a wonderful thing to do and a lot more fun than you think it would possibly ever be. We will also be electing, in addition to the House of Delegates, we will also be electing governor this year, and but not senators for the state, just House of Representatives. Oh, I'm sorry, and Lieutenant Governor and Attorney General. Thank you. That's exactly what we're going to do. We'd like to thank again all of our co-sponsors: Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, the American Association of University Women of Virginia, the Fairfax County Council of PTAs, the NAACP, the Voice of Vietnam, Vietnamese Americans, and Phi Beta, Zeta Phi Beta sorority. So for the League of Women Voters and all of our co-sponsors, thank you very much and good night.